noon Eastern, 9 Pacific, as part of Book TV on our companion network, C-SPAN 2. Washington Journal continues.
This is Doris Haddock on your screen right now. She's earned the nickname Granny D from her past year of walking across the country to support her issue, campaign finance reform. She just made it to Washington, D.C. this week, and we've invited her here to talk to you about her trip and also about the issue. I know you've told this story many times, but at the age of then 89, now 90, what made you take off on this adventure?
Well, I felt that today a poor man has to give up his soul in order to run for office, or he has to be a multimillionaire. I had working on campaign finance reform since 1996, and what I had found out very much distressed me, because I have 12 great-grandchildren, and I want them brought up in a democracy, not a plutocracy or something else.
Are you supporting a particular brand of campaign finance reform?
Yes, I'm in favor of public campaign.
And you would like, explain how it would work, public financing. Who could get public financing in your scenario?
Well, anybody that ran that was qualified. There would be certain qualifications necessary. It would be rather long to explain them all, but people that wish to run would not have to ask for money. The money would be there, and everybody would get the same amount.
Let's move to your walk and have you talk a little bit about why you thought this was an appropriate way to get the message out.
Well, it was the only way that I had. I'm a very poor person living below poverty level, and the only way I could travel would be to go as a pilgrim seeking food and shelter, and that's what I did.
We're going to open up our telephone lines, and because Doris Haddock is very much interested in campaign finance reform, here's how we're setting up our telephone lines. What you're seeing on the screen right now is her website, so we'll leave that and come back to it in a couple of minutes if we can, so we can give our telephone numbers here. We've got it set up so you can discuss campaign finance reform, and the numbers are 202-624-1111 for reform supporters, any sort, if you'd like to talk about what particular campaign finance reform system you propose. And if you like the way it works right now, here's the number, 202-624-1115. Our third number today, 202-737-6734, are for those of you who just have other questions about Doris Haddock's trip across the country. She walked the entire United States from coast to coast, quite an adventure, and if you'd like to hear more about what that experience was like for her, 202-737-6734, and we will go to calls in just a minute or so. Well, what did your friends and family say when you told them what you were planning to do?
My son said that I would have to go through a series of Herculean tasks in order to prove that I could do it, and I did, and he said then, if you can't fight them, join them. So he helped me along the way a great many times. I ended up with a support car, and I had volunteers that were driving it, and when I didn't have volunteer, he would come and spend a few days with me. My friends, of course, thought I was crazy, not insane, but crazy.
How did you stay in touch with people back home who were worried about you?
We had a cell phone, which was probably my biggest expense.
You paid for that yourself?
Oh, yes.
And how much did the trip cost you in total?
Cost me in money?
In total, yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know. I rented my home for $1,000 a month, and I have maybe $1,100 a month in income. A lot of that had to go for taxes and so forth, but anything that was left over, I used. I was in fairly good shape until we began using the cell phones, and they were running. The first bill was $700, and the only way that I could get my message out was through the cell phone, and so that rather floored me. But my son opened a angel account with the New Hampshire Public Charities, and people began sending me money, and I pretty much have come out even except for the cost of the escort car.
Well, let's go to viewers' questions, and their thoughts on campaign finance reform. Our first call for you is from Washington, D.C., supporting campaign finance reform. Good morning.
Good morning. I have to say that Granny D is the most inspirational person that I've ever witnessed before. My question to you is, first of all, I want to say thank you so very much for bringing this to the attention of the American public. What can we do as American citizens to help change besides just contacting our elected officials? Because it seems that not all of them are listening. They want it appears that they want to keep the things the same way rather than changing them. What can we do to make this a broader issue and to follow in your footsteps?
Thank you very much for asking that. I would say first, look at my website, grannyd.com. Find out who your senators are and check and see whether they did vote for the McCain-Feingold bill, which is what I'm espousing and which I hope will take care of soft money, which of course is only the tip of the iceberg. But check out and see what you can do to call them and tell them how you're feeling. Or get a group of your friends together and have them call. That's what we need. We need to convince only 8 more senators that they will vote for McCain-Feingold bill.
And your website address is?
grannyd.com.
Were you an internet user before you started this trip?
Yes, I was doing email.
So you know about the power of the internet to communicate with?
Yes, indeed I do.
Like-minded
and
people.
I went into the internet to see if I could get help there, and I landed with Common Cause, who invited me to come to Washington and talk with them. And they are the ones who sent letters to flash to all of their members throughout the country, and they are the people that have been giving me food and shelter.
For Doris Haddock, next is a caller from Kansas City, Missouri area, supporting the current system.
Yes, ma'am. I have a couple of points I'd like to make. If this nation would address laws that have already been broken and would address the fact that this iron triangle that John McCain talks about is legislators, not legislation, then I think if that were opened up and that were shown, that the reform, to me, sunlight is the best disinfectant. All right?
Yes. Everybody that is in the Senate or the House today has had to use their campaign through this system. The system has broken down, and so it's not really their fault. They're victims. However, they are at fault because they've done nothing about it. And if you ask them to get rid of the soft money, they say, you're asking us to bite the hand that feeds them. And the last time that it was filibustered, Senator McConnell said, we will keep soft money until hell freezes over. So that's the problem.
Your hometown is Dublin, New Hampshire.
Yes.
Have you lived in New Hampshire all your life?
Yes, I was born in Laconia, New Hampshire, which really shocked somebody who called me from Laconia to ask me about myself.
What will it be like, do you think, going back home after all this adventure?
Well, the first thing I have to do is go to the Concord, which is our capital, and have a party. And then, I don't know, I have been asked to visit various states where there are people that are foot dragging, and I shall probably be doing that.
Next call for Doris Haddock is from Converse, Texas, on the favoring reform line.
This is Miss Hill, and I agree with your grandma. I have grandchildren, and I think by the time they grow up, they will not be able to run for president in the United States because it just costs too much money. I think that we should do something with it. I think we have to take our country back. And I will hang up so I can hear what you've got to say.
Well, I think you're right, and I'm so happy that you feel that way. Because I am a poor woman and cannot do anything for my grandchildren, I thought, well, I can give them a legacy getting back our country. At least I can try. And so I have gone across the country, planted seed. And so maybe if we get back our country and have a government of and by the people, both your great-grandchildren and mine will be able to run for office.
We're showing people pictures of your arrival in Washington right now and the rally on the steps of the Capitol. What was that like for you?
My goodness, that was really something. I felt as if I were Alice in Wonderland. I just could not believe it. I had hoped that I would get maybe 100 people, and I ended up with 2,200, so it was just shattering.
A lot of politicians were making speeches that day.
Yes.
Do you believe things will change?
Well, I hope they will. I think I've planted the seed. When I started out, I said I would like to create a wave of interest in campaign finance reform. And whether I have been responsible for that, I don't know. But I do think there has been a wave of interest.
Have you ever considered running for office yourself in your life?
At 90?
No, not now, but earlier. You've been involved in politics for a long time.
No, I worked with the planning board in Dublin, New Hampshire for several terms until I began falling asleep at the meetings and I had to quit.
Next telephone call is from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Good morning.
Good morning.
You're in favor of the current system. Why don't you tell us why?
Yes.
Go ahead, sir. What's your opinion?
Just a minute. Well, I think it was Will Rogers years ago that said how terrible our present form of government was, but it was better than any other form that we knew of. And I think that's pretty much the same way with the campaign financing and one thing or another. While there's so much room for improvement, it seems like, but it's still better than some of the other forms that other countries go through of taking over and shooting the leaders and one thing or another. But what I wanted to mention about people that complain about the special interests and I have to catch my breath here, who donate all this money. A number of years ago, during the McGovern campaign, I had to go to a meeting, and one of the fellows that was at the meeting, or was helping set up the meeting, I asked him how he'd been and what he'd been doing, and he said he was down helping the McGovern campaign down in Omaha, Nebraska. And he went on to explain how all the people were volunteers and had knapsacks.
And what's your question or your point with that?
Well, he was talking about the special money that these horrible corporations and money-hungry people were giving, and he mentioned, I think it was IT&T or AT&T, that offered the Republicans several $100,000 if they would have the campaign in San Diego. And about the same time, there was an article in the paper that some people, and I believe it was General Motors money, I can't think of their name offhand, had given about the same amount of money to the McGovern campaign.
All right, sir, thanks. With apologies, I'm going to let you go because you got a sort of a long story there. And talking about corporate money going to politicians.
Yes, of course, that is the soft money, the money that is given by corporations and by the union under the table, and because of a loop that occurred. And that is what we're trying to get rid of, that soft money. There has always been soft money. There has always been a lot of money in our campaigns, but never like this, never the illegal money that's not allowable.
We have another caller from Sioux Falls, South Dakota for you. This one has a question about your trip. Go ahead, please.
Yes. Granny D, you just made a comment to a caller that called from Washington, D.C., and you said there are 8 more senators that we need to change their mind. Yes. Could you please tell me who they are?
Well, if you look at my website, you'll find them, and that is www.grannyd.com.
We can put it on the screen. Where on the website do you find that specific information?
Yes.
How do you use your website so that...
I really couldn't tell you. There's a great long...
There we go. There's a long list of different links for the website.
Yes.
I
know particularly I have dedicated 1,000 miles of my trip to John Kyle from Arizona, 1,000 miles to Spencer Abraham of Michigan, and 1,000 miles to Mike DeWine of Ohio.
How many miles was your trip in total?
3,200.
Were you ever alone?
Oh, a great many, much more than with people.
What was that like?
Well, I rather enjoy being alone, but sometimes it was tedious. I thought about my speeches that I could make, how I could make them simple so people would understand why the man back home must care about campaign finance reform, because this was what the media and the senators said when they didn't pass that bill.
Were you ever afraid?
No. Well, I did run like the Dickens when I ran into a rattlesnake on the warming him or herself in Arizona.
How many miles did you cover each day?
10 miles.
And did you always find a place to stay?
Yes. I never had to go without a meal or without a shelter.
What was the hardest part of the trip geographically?
Well, I got sick after the desert. I got dehydrated. I didn't drink enough water, and I ended in the hospital for 4 days.
How was it crossing the Rockies?
Well, I didn't cross the Rockies except one mountain, but I'm quite familiar with walking in the mountains because that's what New Hampshire is what we have there.
Next telephone call for Doris Haddock is from Fort Worth, Texas. Good morning. Favoring reform.
Yes, good morning. My idea has been to use public television to its max. Supposedly it reaches 99% of the houses in America. And I say let's have a series of debates going from state to state, have discussions, then have question periods from each group of people around the country, so you can get a feel for what the candidates say and what the people think in that part of the country. Then, if I listen to this guy in the debate over here before it comes to my part of the country, I could call the local television station and say, hey, I'd like to hear that girl or guy here when he gets here. Now, if enough people, enough to reach a predetermined number of calls necessary, call in and request that person's presence in the debate when it gets here, I think, they all have to be registered voters when they make that request.
Well, let me ask you a question about your system you're proposing. The most expensive part, most candidates say, is buying airtime, and that's the major cost in the campaigns. What happens, you're saying use public TV, but won't the candidates still be wanting to spend money for their campaign advertisements and still need to raise money to do that?
Well, I suppose so, but I asked the guy here in the local station, I said, well, how much would it cost, to broadcast this? And he started giving me all kinds of rates and everything, depends on the market and everything. So I said, well, how much does it cost to broadcast McNeil-Lehrer Report nationwide? They show the thing several times a day during the week, so you get pretty good coverage, right? Now, he told me it was approximately $20 million. Now, let's say we can double that, $40 million, say, for the presidential campaign.
So your proposal is to replace the Lehrer program with more information about the candidates?
No. I'm saying run a program like that.
I see. Okay.
Perhaps you could have McNeil-Lehrer do the show itself.
Thanks. We got to let you go because we have a lot of callers on the line, and I'd like to ask Doris Haddock what you think about television time and campaign finance.
Well, we own the airways, and we lease them out, and I believe that it would be to our benefit to have one of them loose and free to work with viable candidates during the campaign.
You've mentioned your grandchildren as one of the motivations. How many do you have?
12.
12 grandchildren.
Great-grandchildren.
12 great-grandchildren.
Eight grandchildren and 12 great-grandchildren.
So 20 following you in the next generation
yes.
so far. Next telephone call is from Las Vegas. Las Vegas, you're on the air.
Good morning, Granny D.
Good morning.
I'm a granny, too.
Good.
I would like to keep the system the way it is, unless, of course, campaign finance reform also gets rid of union money.
Well,
The union money scares me.
well, the union money is included with the corporation money in the McCain-Feingold bill. I don't know why people don't understand that, but it is true. Soft money, both from the unions and the corporations, would be wiped out if we passed the McCain-Feingold bill.
Do you think it's different than it used to be, the whole political process? You've had a lot of years to look at it.
Oh, of course.
What got us to where we are today, do you think?
Well, greed, I guess. It seems I'm not out here bashing corporations. They are our wealth. However, they don't need to be quite so greedy. I think that to us give them corporate welfare, when we say to welfare mothers, get a job or get off the dole, they're not looked at in individual cases. But I think they should be, and I think that the subsidies, the tax breaks, and the special regulations that are given to corporations should be looked at. There are some of them that way out of kilter because, for instance, the ADM was given subsidies for growing corn to study ethanol. That subsidy is still there, though we already know that ethanol cannot replace gasoline. That subsidy is there until 2007.
Next call for you is from Jacksonville, Arkansas. You're on the air, caller.
Yes, ma'am, and I don't mean to throw a blanket on the party here, but Ms. Haddock, can you tell me, is that feather in your hat an eagle feather?
No, it isn't. It was given to me by a person who worships with feathers, and she said that it was a legal feather. I don't know what it is, but it is a legal feather.
You have another question, caller?
Caution you on the fact that if that was an eagle feather, that's a serious federal law.
Yes, I know that.
And someone
I know
may
that.
put you at risk.
Yes, I realize that.
What do you think of the effort that Ms. Haddock made? Caller?
Would caution one problem I've got. I have 3 newspapers I've subscribed to here weekly, daily and everything. And if it wasn't for the current campaign financing system right now, I wouldn't be able to find out a single thing of what George Bush's policies are in his presidential campaign because of all the media devotion to John McCain. The only way I can find out what his positions are through his brochures and pamphlets and everything paid for by private campaign contributions. Thank you, C-SPAN.
Thank you. What would you say to that?
Well,
Did you hear his
know.
point? He said without the current campaign finance system, he'd only hear what the media gives him. And he's hearing more about John McCain than he is about George Bush.
Well, then he's not reading the right newspapers, I would say. I think that they're getting I think maybe it's a little bit more dramatic, the fact that the McCain campaign is bringing out the voters, and that's only 49% of our people vote, and the fact that a flood of independent and some Democrats came to the primaries is what the big news is, and I think that's why it was getting more coverage than was Mr. Bush.
How many interviews do you think you gave along the way?
Oh, at first I got very few, but but every little town I went to, as you can see, these are all keys to the city, which they use instead of the keys. Locally, I was interviewed very well in every newspaper. I can't think of one as I went along that didn't speak to me. Oftentimes, it was while I was there, and so I didn't get the clippings, but I was very well treated in the local media.
When did the first national news organization find you, and how do you think it happened?
A local newspaper in New Hampshire mentioned the fact that I said I was going to cross the country, and that was way back in 1998, the very beginning of the year, because it was in February of that I said that I was going to do this. USA Today has a paper, has a page in which they make a 2-line item of everything that's happening in each one of the states. This was a no-news day, apparently. So under New Hampshire, it said Doris Haddock says she's going to cross the country at the age of 88 for campaign finance reform. That was picked up by all the radios across the country. It was on their bulletin board, and that is when I got started.
Conover, North Carolina, for Doris Haddock.
Good morning.
Morning.
I would like to find out why we were talking so much about campaign finance reform now when we don't even know what went on in the 1996 campaign, where the current administration sent their fundraisers to China to bring in illegal money, where the vice president went into a Buddhist temple where they were laundering money, where numerous people have fled the country, hid behind the Fifth Amendment, and we have an attorney general that is covering this up. Why don't we go after this first and then talk about campaign finance reform? I'm all for cleaning up the system, but not for covering up what has happened in the past. And by the way, just yesterday a lady was sentenced that was a fundraiser for Vice President Gore. We barely heard a blip on this on the news, yet constantly we hear about Governor Bush being at Bob Jones University. I think that the news media could help out a little bit too if they were not so biased.
Well, as a matter of fact, sir, earlier in the program we showed almost every single newspaper we have here has front page coverage of Maria Shaw's conviction yesterday. So you might check your newspapers as you get out there and see if it's gotten some coverage locally. Thank you for your call. Anything in response to that caller?
Well, I don't know what the question was. His question, I mean, he made a statement, but he did not ask a question. So I can't remember what it was.
All right, he wants to clean up the current system and find out what happened in 1996.
Oh, well, you know, John McCain, when he made his first speech on McCain-Feingold bill, said that we are corrupt because the system is corrupt, and I am corrupt. At least he made that statement, and he admitted that he was corrupt, but he is the one that wants to make the change. Both he and Bill Bradley have made this statement. On the other hand, Mr. Bush said that he was not in favor of getting rid of corporate soft money because it would hurt the Republicans. And then it was some time later that he said that he was in favor of getting rid of it. So that's the way it stood.
You have gotten a view of America that most people will never get, right from the ground up. Have your opinions about our country changed as a result of your journey?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think it's all very beautiful. But I think there is somewhat of it's like a sleeping giant. There's a turmoil. People coming out of their houses and saying to me, I'm with you, Granny. I do not like the amount of money that's being spent on campaign finance reform when there are so many other things that money could be used for.